Hey, this is Leo, and in this video I will show you the most important new features in AbleSet 2.5. The first and biggest new feature is the ability to define that AbleSet should automatically jump to another section when a section ends. To give you an example of how this works, I have a song here called Roads, which is almost 6 minutes long, but that's just a bit too long for the current set length that we need to keep in mind. So we want to stay below 30 minutes, for example. So what I'd like to do to keep this song a bit shorter is I would like to skip the choir loop in and the piano and shaker loop in. To do that, let's rename this clip. And I will just add 3 arrows and then the name of the section that AbleSet should jump to after this section. So in this case, instrumental intro. So let's apply those changes. And if you're working with section clips like I am, you will likely see an error message here, which says, in my case, instrumental intro doesn't have a locator. That's fairly easy to fix. Let's just go here and add a locator. And you will now see that AbleSet highlights this jump from intro to the instrumental intro. And it also shows you that these 2 sections here are skipped. You'll also see that the total duration of the song has decreased. And that also means that we are now below the 30-minute mark in our set. Now, if I go to the end of the instrumental intro and press play, AbleSet automatically jumps to the instrumental intro. Now, these automatic jumps don't necessarily have to jump to one of the next sections. You can also jump backwards. So, for example, let's say I want to create a kind of loop from the chorus back to the first verse. I can do that by just adding 3 arrows, verse 1, and then, of course, add a locator to verse 1. And you'll now see that we have an arrow here as well. And if we reach the end of the chorus, AbleSet automatically jumps back to the first verse. With this setup, because we're always jumping back to another section, AbleSet knows that we will never reach one of these last sections and marks them as skipped as well. You can always spontaneously override those automatic jumps. So for example, if we are in the instrumental intro, let's start playback here, but I want to jump to the first verse, I can just click it. And AbleSet jumps to the queued section instead of this automatic jump here. Now, speaking of jumps, there is a new jump mode. So if we go to settings and go to the jump mode, we now have a dynamic jump mode. And what this does is if you are jumping to a section, AbleSet waits until the end of the section to make the jump. But if you are jumping to a song, AbleSet waits for the end of the current song before making the jump. So let's say we're currently in the intro of the song and we want to jump to the first verse. Let me just do that. AbleSet waits until the end of the section. Now let's say we reach the end of the first verse and we queue another song. AbleSet will wait until this current song is finished before jumping there. Or we can always pause playback and then AbleSet will jump to the queued song. Another smaller but handy feature is the ability to open the setlist in a floating window, which is especially handy if you have a small screen. So let's say we want to use Ableton in a full screen setup. We can now click on AbleSet and then open AbleSet in a floating window. This now opens a window that just shows the web app. You can resize it however small or large you want, and it'll always stay in the foreground. Now this means I can make some edits here, for example. I can browse around in the timeline, but I can still jump between songs and I can start playback and all that stuff from here. I've also added a few improvements to the performance and lyrics view. So for example, if we go to the performance view, previously you would only have 3 buttons here, which means that, for example, you can only toggle the loop if you're currently playing. But if you're using a larger screen, there's a new option called 4 control buttons, which gives you a loop button as well. This loop button is now also available on the lyrics page. So I now here have a button that I can click to enable or disable the loop. For the next new features, let's go to the MIDI mapping page, because AbleSet now has the ability to send custom OSC commands to any server on your network. This could be a light desk, for example, or a mixing console, or it could be the Ableton OSC script, which allows you to control various functions in Ableton using OSC. To demonstrate this, I've loaded up the Ableton OSC script. So now I can send OSC commands to that script. Let me just add a new mapping here, which I can now set to custom OSC. And if you want to send OSC commands to an external server, you just have to prefix it with the IP address and the port. So in my case, since Ableton OSC and AbleSet are running on the same computer, the IP address would be 127.0.0.1, and the port in this case is 11,000. So let's say I want to have buttons that enable and disable the recording in Ableton. To do that, I can just add the OSC command here, which in this case is /live/song/set/record mode. And I want to map this button to enable it. And then I want another button that basically sends the same command but disables it. Now, if I press this one button, Ableton starts playing and enables the record mode. And if I press the other one, Ableton disables the record mode. You can also combine these commands with AbleSet internal ones. So let's say after disabling the record mode, I also want AbleSet to stop playback. I can add a semicolon and then /global/stop. Now let's start the recording again. And if I now press the other button, Ableton stops the recording and stops playback as well. Speaking of MIDI mapping, you can also now map a button to either mute or solo the click tracks, which might be handy if something goes wrong and you want to mute all audio except for the click, for example. So let's add a new mapping. And now you can see that I have the option to either solo the click, unsolo the click, or toggle the click solo. I can also mute or unmute the click, but for now I'll just use the toggle click solo. Now if I click the button, you'll see that the click track is soloed, and if I click it again, the click track is unsoloed. AbleSet 2.5 now also allows you to mark any number of tracks as click tracks. So for example, if I wanted to solo the guide track along with the click track, I could just add a +click flag here. And now if I toggle the click solo using my MIDI controller, you'll see that both tracks get soloed. This also works with return tracks. So if I insert a new return track, and I'll just call that return +click, then this return track gets soloed as well. And last, AbleSet 2.5 comes with an update to the AbleSet Max for Live device, which adds an AbleNet toggle. If you're running a truly redundant setup where each computer receives the same MIDI messages from your MIDI controller, then you can disable this. So now each computer just processes the MIDI commands locally and doesn't send them through AbleNet. If you're using a MIDI controller that is just connected to one of the computers, you should enable this so that now all the commands that are sent to the one computer are also sent to your other computers via AbleNet. AbleSet 2.5 comes with a bunch of other improvements and fixes, so if you want to see the whole list, I've linked the changelog below. Let me know if you have any questions or feedback, and I wish you a great day.